G'day. I've been asked about my cruise control in my Lexus IS200. For any manual transmission IS200 owners out there, this has probably been a point of contention for you at some stage, especially if you've ever taken your car on a long trip. My IS200 was only a couple of years old when I bought it, and I almost walked away from buying a manual because of the lack of cruise control. But then I thought to myself, you can put your own cruise control in a car. That's not a big deal. And so I went ahead and purchased a manual transmission rather than an automatic. I've been thoroughly pleased with that decision for the entire time I've had the car. I did have the car for a year or two before I decided it was absolutely essential that I install cruise control on the car. It was just too big of a compromise for me not having cruise control in a car that I like to do a lot of kilometers in. The purpose of this video is to share with you how I installed the cruise control system in this car. If you're purchasing an IS200 these days, you're probably purchasing it more as a classic car than you are as a small luxury sedan like I was when I purchased this back in the early 2000s. I'll get on with sharing with you the main components of the installation. When I first installed the cruise control system on this car, I initially went for the option of this gear stick mounted cruise control switch, which sat fairly nicely on top of that gear shifter there. I did enjoy that setup for the fact that it was non-intrusive and I didn't have to cut any holes anywhere in my car. Eventually though, what bothered me was the height of this switch, which as you can see is near enough to 80 millimeters high. By having that extra nearly 1.5 inches of throw, the nice feel of the short shifter just wasn't there. And it was too much of a compromise to me to live with that. For me, the leather shifter and the nice short throw is part of the appeal of having an IS200. So what I opted to do was actually to find and install a factory steering wheel mounted switch, and you can see that there. Installing this switch was no simple task. There was a little bit of engineering required to get this working. The switch itself had a built-in voltage divider network and basically used 3 wires to send a signal back to the ECU. Now, anyone that's familiar with the IS200 will know that this car is essentially a drive-by-wire throttle system, even though it has a cable all the way up to the throttle body. I imagine the automatic transmission cruise control system just used a signal to the throttle body to accelerate and decelerate, etc. As needed. As I said, getting this switch to actually work with the system I had was a little bit of a engineering task. I did have to figure out some wiring technicalities, and I did take notes of that when I installed this system. Keep in mind though that I installed this system around 15 or 16 years ago, so it has been a long time since I did that. I may not remember everything clearly. What I do recall though was I had to remove the airbag here and the horn pad. If you're intending to undertake this task, go into it prepared to spend a little bit of time, and please follow the IS200 maintenance manual guide so that you don't end up with some sort of accidental discharge of the system, or worse, causing the system to have a fault where it won't actually work for you if you ever need it, which I hope you never do. So let's get to the under bonnet part of the installation. And if you're wondering what a Lexus IS200 that's 22 years old and has done a fraction under 300,000 kilometers looks like, well, this is basically it. You can see in there is some oil residue around the rocker cover. I think the rocker cover gasket started leaking about 25,000 Ks ago. I replaced it then. Some of the plastic fairings aren't looking anywhere near as good as they used to. But overall, for a car that's done 300,000 kilometres, it's actually pretty remarkable. Notwithstanding, it still has, as far as I know, the original radiator in it. Now, for a radiator with plastic tanks, that's pretty incredible. I do sometimes wonder when I'm driving, is my luck going to start running out soon with regard to this radiator? Anyway, back to the cruise control system. The system uses a vacuum operated servo, so there's a little wiring loom that comes down there and a vacuum line which I intercepted the brake booster vacuum signal, and that has worked flawlessly since I installed this system all those years ago. The throttle cable comes up through the firewall here, and basically my actuator for the cruise control comes along and joins that cable, which comes out here. The original cable system had a nice rubber damper around the throttle. What I did was create a little plate and screwed it on there to give me some extra real estate for the mounting of the second cable. And the second cable just uses that same bell crank as the throttle cable and is terminated down there with a typical screw and nut type of cable end. So that takes care of the mechanical operation of the throttle. That has worked flawlessly since I installed this system, 15 or 16 years ago, whenever it was. The system I installed was called the AP300. I believe you can still purchase systems manufactured by this organisation. Most cars now are completely drive-by-wire, so the use of a vacuum operated cruise control is probably nearly obsolete, so I'm not sure if you can actually still purchase that vacuum servo system. And you can see here some of the wiring notes that I took when I was installing that factory switch. Obviously I had to run additional wires to the switch. They needed to come through the steering wheel slip ring connector, and I have some notes there of which wires went to which pins. You can see here this is the column side and this is the wheel side. Lastly, there's the brains of the actual cruise control system, which I mounted just there using double-sided tape. That's the factory amplifier there, and the control box fitted nicely in between the amplifier and the heater duct there. Little bit of wiring, which I did my best to cable tie them tightly down so that they wouldn't rattle, and that's worked quite effectively. And lastly, the wiring loom for the control of the servo, which comes from the control unit, just slipped through the side of the rubber grommet down there. Nice, simple install. As far as the pedals go, the system backs off the factory brake light switch for its brake sensor. Installing a clutch switch was nice and easy. The mounting and everything required for that was already there. I just whipped out the clutch height control screw and replaced that with a Toyota brake light switch. Now this is the part of the installation that I'm kind of not so proud of. I had to drill through the steering wheel fairing here, and as you can see I kind of butchered it around the back there. I really would have liked to have done a better job of that. Having said that, from the driver's seat you just don't see that. Anyway, that's it. There's an overview of my aftermarket cruise control system on my IS200. As I said earlier, I installed this system back in the mid-noughties and has worked quite flawlessly the entire time, giving me a good 15 or 16 years of service without any trouble whatsoever. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. See you later.